A man kneels on a hillside above the Sea of Galilee. It is the hour before dawn. The grass is wet. The sky behind him is the color of bruised fruit. And below, in the valley, the lamps of a few small houses are starting to flicker out. The man has been praying all night. You can imagine the cold in his joints. You can imagine the silence. You can imagine the kind of stillness that only happens at 4 a.m. on a mountain, when even the birds have not yet remembered how to sing. The man is Jesus of Nazareth. And before the sun rises, he is going to do something that will, in less than 300 years, end the religion of the Roman Empire. He is going to choose 12 names, not 11, not 13, 12. One for every tribe of Israel, one for every gate of the New Jerusalem, a number that is going to echo for the rest of history. But here's what most people miss. The 12 names he is about to speak, they are not the names you would have chosen. You would have chosen priests. You would have chosen scribes. You would have chosen men with reputations and Hebrew school transcripts and at least one signed scroll from a rabbi in Jerusalem. That is who you build a movement with. That is not who he picks. He picks 4 fishermen who smell like fish. He picks a man who has been collecting Roman taxes from his own people. He picks a political revolutionary who, 10 years earlier, would have happily slit that tax collector's throat. He picks a skeptic from a town nobody respected. He picks a man who will spend the rest of his life unable to take anyone's word for anything, and knowing exactly what he is doing. He picks a treasurer who will, in less than 3 years, sell him for the price of a slave. 12 names. 12 men who do not belong in the same room together. This is the story of every one of them. And here is the part nobody tells you. 11 of those 12 are going to die for what they are about to see. They are going to die in city squares and in prison yards. They are going to die on crosses planted in foreign soil. They are going to die by sword, by stone, by spear, by being flayed alive in front of strangers who do not speak their language. But one of them, just one of them is not going to die by any blade. He is going to outlive every brother he started with. He is going to grow old. He is going to grow very old. And one afternoon, on a black volcanic rock in the middle of the Aegean Sea, that old man is going to fall on his face before a vision so violent he cannot stand up. We are going to get to him, but not yet. First, the mountain. First, the names. First, the morning the world quietly changed. The first name he calls is Simon. You know Simon? You have met him. He is the kind of man you would call to help you move a couch, and also the kind of man you would not invite to a small dinner party. He is loud. He is impulsive. He cuts off a soldier's ear without thinking about it, and he denies Jesus 3 times before sunrise without thinking about that either. But Jesus looks at him on that morning and says one word that changes his name. Cephas. In Aramaic, it means rock. In Greek, Petros. From this morning on, the loud fisherman will not be Simon anymore. He will be Peter. And in 3 years, on a hill outside Jerusalem, after he has run, denied, wept, and run again, Jesus will meet him on a beach, cook him breakfast, and ask him 3 times in a row whether he loves him. One question for every denial. The man you would not invite to dinner is going to be the first stone of the church. Stay with me. The second name is Andrew, Peter's brother, quieter. The one in Scripture who was always introducing other people to Jesus. He brings his brother. He brings a boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He brings the Greeks who come asking. The Greek tradition calls him Protoklētos, the first called, the first man on earth to look at Jesus of Nazareth and say, "We have found the Messiah." A footnote in most sermons, the most decisive sentence in his. The third and fourth names are James and John, brothers, sons of a Galilean fisherman named Zebedee. Their mother sometimes shows up in the Gospels asking Jesus to give her boys the two best seats in heaven. You know that mother. So does Jesus. He laughs and tells her she does not know what she is asking. Jesus has a nickname for these two brothers, Boanērges. It means sons of thunder. You can hear the affection in it. You can hear the eye roll in it. These are the brothers who, when a Samaritan village refuses Jesus' hospitality, walk up to him and ask permission to call down fire from heaven and burn the whole town to the ground. That is the level of subtlety we are dealing with. These will be the men who, decades later, write the Gospel of John and lead the church through its first persecutions. The thunder gets aimed at something useful. Now, pay attention to this. The next two names Jesus speaks should not be spoken in the same breath. The fifth man is Matthew. Matthew is a tax collector. To you in the 21st century, that sounds boring. To a Jew in first century Galilee, a tax collector was not boring. A tax collector was a traitor. A tax collector was a Jew who worked for Rome, collecting money from his own neighbors, his own cousins, his own former friends, and who by long custom took a little extra off the top for himself. You did not invite a tax collector to your house. You did not let your daughter marry one. You did not greet one on the street. Jesus walks up to Matthew's tax booth in Capernaum. Matthew is sitting behind a stack of coins and a ledger. The narrative is 6 words long. Follow me. And Matthew, the man no rabbi would touch, stands up and walks away from the only career he has. We are told nothing about what he is thinking. We are told only that he leaves the booth and the money and the ledger sitting open in the sun. Then he throws a dinner party. He invites every other social outcast he knows. Jesus comes. The Pharisees look in through the window and lose their minds. But the sixth name is the one that should have started a fight. The sixth man is Simon, not Peter, another Simon. The gospel calls him Simon the Zealot. In Greek, zelotes, a member of the political resistance. The Zealots were the first century equivalent of armed revolutionaries. Jewish men who believed Rome had to be driven out of the Holy Land by force. They carried knives. They sometimes used them on Roman soldiers. They sometimes used them on Jews who collaborated with Rome. Jews like, for example, tax collectors. Read that again. The man Jesus has just called in the same breath as Matthew is the kind of man who, 2 years earlier, would have happily put a blade between Matthew's ribs. And now, they're going to share bread for the next 3 years. This is not a polite Bible study group. This is 12 men who, on paper, should be at each other's throats. Jesus is not building a network. He is building a small, walking demonstration of what the kingdom of heaven looks like when it actually arrives. Here is what nobody tells you. 12 men, fishermen, a tax collector, a revolutionary, and others we have not even met yet, are about to be sent out into a world that thinks they are nothing. And inside 30 years, every one of them will be either dead or on the run, and the message they carry will have reached Rome, Armenia, Persia, Ethiopia, and India. 12 men, 12 directions, one sentence. He is risen. You have to picture this morning carefully. 12 men standing on a hill outside a town no one in Jerusalem has heard of. 12 men who, before this hour did not know each other. 12 men who are about to spend the next 3 years sleeping in the same fields, eating from the same bread, watching the same teacher. These are not priests. These are not scholars. These are not statesmen. These are fishermen with calloused hands, a tax collector with a guilty conscience, a revolutionary with a temper, a skeptic from a forgotten village, and 6 more men, some of whom you will hardly hear named again until tradition catches up with their deaths. Jesus knows what he is doing. He knows them all. He has prayed all night about every one of them. And he calls them apostles. The Greek word is apostolos. It means one who is sent, a messenger with the authority of the one who sent him. Up until this moment, they have been mathetes, learners, apprentices, men walking behind the master. From this morning forward, they are something else. They are sent. You and I have to slow down here, because there is a sentence in John chapter 6 that the longer you look at it, the more it bends the whole story. Jesus, late in his ministry, turns to the 12 and says, "Have I not chosen you 12? And one of you is a devil." He knew. He knew from the morning on the mountain. He knew which name he was speaking when he spoke it. He named Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, anyway. And nobody around him heard the warning. We will get to that name. We will get to all of them. But first, the next 6, 6 down, 6 to go. And we are about to walk into the part of this story that does not make it into most sermons. The part where the 12 scatter to the ends of the empire and start dying for what they saw. If you are still with me, do me one small favor. Hit the subscribe button. The channel is small. Every subscriber helps the next person find this, and then come back, because the second half of this video is heavier than the first. 6 men left to meet, including the one whose name we cannot say without flinching. The 7th name is Philip. Philip is from Bethsaida, the same little fishing town that produced Peter and Andrew. He is the one in the Gospels who keeps asking the practical questions. When Jesus looks at a crowd of 5,000 hungry people and asks Philip where they will buy bread, Philip does the math out loud. 8 months' wages, he says, would not be enough to give each of them one bite. You can hear the disciple in him, the man who needs to see the spreadsheet before he believes the miracle. But the most decisive sentence Philip ever says is at the Last Supper. He has been with Jesus for 3 years. He has seen the dead come back. He has seen the storm go quiet. He has watched 5 loaves feed an army. And on the last night in the upper room, he leans toward Jesus and says, quietly, like a man who was finally asking what he has wanted to ask the whole time, "Lord, show us the Father, and it will be enough for us." And Jesus answers him with a sentence that is going to echo for 2,000 years. "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." Philip will die, according to Protoklētos of Ephesus, in a city called Hierapolis. The tradition says he was crucified upside down. The tradition says he kept preaching from the cross until they killed him. The 8th name is Bartholomew. The Gospel of John seems to call him by another name, Nathanael. He is the one Philip drags to Jesus on the first day, and his opening line is one of the most honest things any disciple ever says. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? That is not a polite question. That is the question of a man who is tired of fake messiahs. Galilee has had 3 or 4 self-proclaimed deliverers in the past generation, and every one of them got the same people killed. Nathanael is asking, prove this one is different. Jesus answers him not with an argument, but by telling him exactly what Nathanael was doing before Philip ever found him. "I saw you under the fig tree." That is all it takes. the skeptic falls to his knees. Bartholomew, according to Eusebius, takes the gospel into Armenia, and tradition tells us the death they gave him there was one of the most brutal in the early church. He was flayed alive, his skin removed while he was still breathing, and then beheaded. There are paintings of him in Italian churches carrying his own skin folded over his arm. Hold that thought. The ninth name is Thomas. The gospel calls him Didymos, the twin. We do not know who his twin was. We know what he is famous for. You know him as the doubter. That is unfair. Before he ever doubted the resurrection, he was the one who, when Jesus said he was going back to Judea to raise Lazarus, knowing full well the religious leaders there wanted him dead, Thomas turned to the others and said, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." That is not doubt. That is the voice of a man who has already counted the cost. He missed the room when the risen Christ first appeared. He said the line that has hung around his neck ever since: "Unless I see the marks of the nails, I will not believe." 8 days later, the risen Christ walked through a wall and put Thomas's hand in his side. The tradition, preserved in the Acts of Thomas and confirmed by Eusebius, is that Thomas took the gospel further east than any other apostle. He died near a hill in Milapur on the coast of India, killed by spears. To this day, there are Indian Christians who call themselves Thomas Christians after the apostle who, 2,000 years ago, came to them carrying a message about a man he had personally watched come back from the dead. Now watch what happens next. We have 3 more men, and the gospel writers tell us almost nothing about them. The 10th name is James the Less, son of Alphaeus. The 11th name is Thaddaeus, sometimes called Jude, the brother of James. The 12th, except for the one we are saving, is the Simon the Zealot we have already met. These 3 men, the so-called minor disciples, are the ones who tell you the loudest thing about the kingdom of God. Because here is what you have to understand. None of these 3 has a single sermon recorded in the New Testament. None of them is named on a particularly memorable page. And yet, according to Hippolytus of Rome, writing in the 2nd century with sources we no longer have, every one of them went out, kept preaching, and died for what they had seen. James the Less, beaten to death and stoned. Thaddaeus, clubbed in Persia. Simon the Zealot, sawn in 2, also in Persia, by the same regime that took Thaddaeus. 3 obscure men, 3 brutal deaths. No headlines, no stained glass windows in your local cathedral. Just 3 more graves in places far from home. If you are wondering why 3 men nobody talks about would give their lives for what they saw, when they could have walked away and gone home, you have to remember something. They were on the mountain that morning. They heard their names called, and they had stood in a locked room after Jesus came back and put their hands on a body that had been in the grave 3 days earlier. You don't unsee that. Which brings us to the 12th man, the one whose name we cannot say without flinching. The 12th man's name is Judas, Judas Iscariot, Judas from Kerioth, the only disciple who was not from Galilee. He is the only southerner in the group. He is also, by the gospel writer's own admission, the treasurer. He carries the money bag. And from time to time, when nobody is watching, he helps himself to what is in it. For 3 years, he eats the bread, walks the road, watches the miracles. For 3 years, he sits at the campfire. And then, for 30 silver coins, the price of a slave in the Old Testament, the cheapest legal price for a human life, he walks to the chief priests and trades the man who chose him on the mountain. It is the most expensive haircut in history, 30 pieces of silver, about 4 months' wages for a laborer, for the Son of God. By dawn, Jesus is in chains. By the next day, Jesus is dead. By the day after that, Judas Iscariot is hanging from a tree outside the city by his own hand, his money still in the temple, a field of blood bought with the price of his own teacher. And the 12 are 11 men. The traitor is dead by suicide. The remaining 11 are sitting in a locked room in Jerusalem, terrified, doors barred against the religious leaders who killed their teacher. And then Jesus walks through the wall. You have to imagine the silence in that room. 40 days later, on a hill outside Bethany, those 11 men watched their teacher leave the planet under his own power. And then, 10 days after that, in an upper room on the morning of Pentecost, something descends on them that they describe as fire and wind. 3,000 people get baptized that afternoon. Peter, the man who denied Jesus 3 times 43 days earlier, preaches the first Christian sermon. The church is born, and then, one by one, the 11 scatter. This is the part most videos skip, so pay attention. The first of the 12 to die is James the Greater, one of the sons of thunder, the brother of John. The year is somewhere around 44. The Roman puppet king, Herod Agrippa I, grandson of the Herod who killed the babies in Bethlehem, wants to please the Jewish leaders. So he arrests James and has him executed by sword. We know this not from tradition, but from the book of Acts itself. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. 11 words. The entire Bible record of an apostle's death. Peter is arrested next, the same year, by the same king. He gets out. An angel walks him through the prison gates while the soldiers stand frozen. He will not be that lucky the second time. About 20 years later, in the city of Rome, the Emperor Nero burns half his own capital to the ground and blames it on the Christians. The Roman historian Tacitus, who is not a Christian, who has no reason to lie, describes what happens next in the annals. Christians sewn into animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Christians crucified along the roads. Christians lit on fire at night to provide lamplight for Nero's garden parties. Peter is somewhere in that crowd. The tradition, preserved by Origen, repeated by Eusebius, says that when they came to crucify him, he asked to be hung upside down. He did not believe, he said, that he was worthy to die the same way his teacher had. The fisherman from Galilee dies head down on a Roman cross. The rock dies for the kingdom he denied 3 times. Here is what nobody tells you. In the next 40 years, the pattern repeats. Andrew dies on an X-shaped cross in Patmos, Greece, preaching, the tradition says, from the cross for 2 days before he stops breathing. Philip is crucified at Hierapolis. Bartholomew is flayed alive in Armenia. Thomas is run through with spears on a hill in India. James the Less is stoned and beaten. Thaddaeus is clubbed to death in Persia. Simon the Zealot is sawn in 2 in the same country. Matthew, according to Fox and the Eastern tradition, is killed in Ethiopia. 11 men, 11 countries, 11 graves nobody can find now. And then there is the 12th living one, the last. His name is John. You remember him, son of thunder, the youngest of the 12, the one Jesus called the disciple whom he loved, the one who stood at the foot of the cross when every other man had run, the one Jesus, dying, gave his own mother to. John outlives every brother he started with. The Emperor Domitian, sometime in the 90s of the 1st century, tries to kill him. The tradition, preserved in the late 2nd century by Tertullian, is that they put John in a vat of boiling oil and pulled him out alive. And so, instead of burning him, they did the next worst thing. They put him on a boat to Patmos. You can find Patmos on a map. It is a small Greek island in the Aegean Sea, about 35 miles off the coast of Turkey. It is a piece of black volcanic rock the Romans used as a prison colony. They sent political prisoners there to die slowly of exposure and old age. And there, on that black rock, the last of the 12 has the conversation that closes the entire Bible. The same voice that called him from his father's fishing boat on the Sea of Galilee when he was a teenager mending nets with his brother. That voice speaks one more time, 60 years later, on the Aegean Sea. I am the Alpha and the Omega. John falls on his face like a dead man, and he writes down what he sees. The book is called Revelation, and every word of it comes from the last living member of a group of 12 men who, 60 years earlier, had stood on a hill above the Sea of Galilee at 4 o'clock in the morning and heard their teacher say, "Follow me." And then John, last of the 12, dies of old age in Ephesus. The only one? This is not a list of deaths. This is not a tally of martyrs. This is not a catalog of suffering. This is 12 men who saw something so real, they refused to unsay it, even when the cost was their own breath. And the pattern they started has never stopped. In the year 155, in the city of Smyrna, a man named Polycarp, a disciple of the Apostle John himself, 86 years old, hauled in front of a Roman magistrate and ordered to curse Christ, looked at the magistrate and said, 86 years have I served him, and he has done me no wrong. How then can I blaspheme my king who saved me? They burned him alive in front of a stadium. In April of 1945, in a German concentration camp called Flossenburg, 2 weeks before the Allies liberated it, a Lutheran pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer was hanged for resisting Adolf Hitler. His last recorded words, "This is the end. For me, the beginning of life." In February of 2015, on a beach in Libya, 21 men were beheaded by men in black masks. 20 of them were Egyptian Coptic Christians. One of them was a young Ghanaian, not even a believer, who was offered his release and refused. Eyewitnesses say he looked at his executioners and said one sentence, "Their God is my God." 2,000 years. The pattern has not stopped. It started with 12 men on a hill. 3 things to take with you. The first one is this. Jesus of Nazareth did not build his kingdom out of the qualified. He built it out of fishermen who smelled like fish, a tax collector who had stolen from his own people, a political revolutionary who had carried a knife, a skeptic from a forgotten town, a doubter who needed to put his hand in a wound, 3 men so obscure we barely have their names, and a treasurer who sold him for the price of a slave. If you are waiting until you are qualified to be useful to God, you are using a measuring stick he has never used in 2,000 years. The second thing is this. Read the Gospels carefully and you will notice something. Jesus never once corrected the 12 for being unqualified. He corrected them for being slow to believe. He corrected them for being proud. He corrected them for falling asleep when he asked them to pray. He corrected them often for arguing about who was the greatest. He never once corrected them for being who they were. He picked you the way you are. He picked them the way they were. And the work he is going to do through you in the next 10 years is not waiting for you to become someone you are not. It is waiting for you to be willing. The third thing's the heaviest. I want you to sit with this one. 11 of those 12 men were tortured to death. Not in a dark, anonymous way, most of them in front of crowds. They had decades, every one of them, to recant, to say it was a hallucination, to say they had been mistaken, to say, we made it up. Confession would have spared their lives. Confession would have spared their families. Confession would have spared their reputations. Not one of them confessed. 11 men on 11 different continents and provinces, holding to the same story for 30, 40, 50 years of pressure, and dying with the same words on their lips. He is risen. People do not die like that for a story they invented. The question is not whether the resurrection is true. The question is, if you knew it was, what would you change tomorrow morning? Which of the 12 hit you the hardest in this video? Was it Peter, who denied his teacher and then died upside down for him? Was it Thomas, the doubter, who became the man who carried the gospel further east than anyone else? Was it John, the last one standing, the old man on the black rock? Tell me below in the comments. I read them all. If this video helped you see the 12 a little differently, hit the like button, subscribe, so the next one finds you. 12 men stood on a hill outside the Sea of Galilee at 4 o'clock in the morning, 2,000 years ago, and heard their teacher say, "Follow me." The kingdom they walked into has not stopped expanding since.